I don't regret anything. It was for my country and my family. That's all that matters.
I remember the cold more than the fear. Isn't that strange? You'd think after all these years I'd remember the artillery first, or the faces of the men who didn't make it home. But no, what comes back to me, even now when I'm sitting by this fire with a blanket around my shoulders, is the cold. The kind that gets into your bones and stays there. The kind that makes you wonder if you'll ever be warm again. They told us we were fighting for freedom. I was 19 years old, and I didn't really understand what that meant. Not then. Freedom was just a word politicians used in speeches, something they printed on posters back home. But I learned what it meant. God help me, I learned it in those trenches, on those frozen nights when we huddled together just to stay alive. My name doesn't matter much anymore. I'm just another old man now. One of the few left who can still tell you what it was really like. Not the version you see in the movies, with the dramatic music and the heroes who never get tired or scared. I'm talking about the real thing. The mud, the exhaustion, the nights when you were so cold you couldn't feel your feet, and you'd look at the man next to you and wonder if both of you would see the morning. This is a true story. My story. And the story of thousands of men just like me who slept in trenches during World War II, trying to survive the winter while fighting a war we barely understood. I'm telling it now because those of us who were there were fading away. Soon there won't be anyone left who remembers what it was really like. And I think that matters. I think it needs to be remembered, not because war is glorious, it isn't, but because what we went through, what we endured, it meant something. It had to mean something. I shipped out in the autumn of 1944, 23rd Infantry Division. Most of us were kids, really. Farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Detroit, college kids who had left their studies halfway through. We came from everywhere, and we came together in a way that's hard to explain to someone who wasn't there. War does that. It strips away everything that doesn't matter and shows you what's real. The training was tough, but training never prepares you for the actual thing. They can teach you how to dig a foxhole, how to load a rifle, how to march for hours without complaining. What they can't teach you is what it feels like when the temperature drops below freezing and you're lying in a ditch with 3 inches of ice-cold water at the bottom. They can't teach you how to sleep when every muscle in your body is trembling, when your teeth won't stop chattering, when you're so tired you could cry but too cold to close your eyes. We arrived in France in November. The countryside was beautiful in a way that seemed wrong, considering what we were there to do. Rolling fields, small villages with stone churches, forests that looked like something from a painting. But winter was coming. You could feel it in the air, smell it in the wind that cut through your uniform like it wasn't even there. Our unit was assigned to push east toward Germany. The officers told us we'd be home by Christmas. We'd heard that before. Most of us had stopped believing it, but we didn't say so out loud. You learn to keep those thoughts to yourself, to smile and nod and say, "Sure, sounds good," even when you knew it was nonsense. The first night we spent in the trenches, I thought I was going to die. Not from enemy fire, though that was always a possibility, but from the cold. We'd been marching all day, through mud that sucked at your boots with every step. By the time we reached our position, the sun was going down, and the temperature was dropping fast. The trench was maybe 4 feet deep, just enough to keep your head below the level of the ground. The bottom was filled with water, freezing water that soaked through your boots in seconds. There were wooden duckboards laid down to keep you out of the worst of it, but they were slick with ice and half rotten in places. You had to watch your step or you'd slip and go down hard, maybe twist an ankle or worse. We had blankets, thin wool blankets that the Army issued, 1 per man. They were supposed to keep you warm, but they were nearly useless when they got wet, and they were always wet.
The moisture in the air, the rain, the snow, the sweat from your own body. It all soaked into that wool until it felt like you were wrapping yourself in a cold, damp towel. That first night, I lay on the duck boards with my blanket pulled up to my chin, shivering so hard I thought my bones would break. My feet were numb, my fingers were numb. I could see my breath in the air, little clouds that disappeared almost as soon as they formed. Above me the sky was clear and full of stars, beautiful and indifferent. The stars didn't care if I froze to death. The cold didn't care. The war didn't care. Next to me, a kid named Tommy Breslin from somewhere in Ohio was praying. Not out loud, but I could see his lips moving, could hear the faint whisper of words I couldn't quite make out. I wasn't much of a praying man back then, but I understood why he was doing it. When you're that cold, that miserable, that scared, you need something to hold on to. For Tommy, it was prayer. For others, it was a photograph from home, or a letter they'd read 100 times, or just the thought of someone waiting for them back in the States. For me, it was anger. I was angry at the cold, angry at the Army for putting us here, angry at the Germans for starting this whole damn thing. That anger kept me warm in a way the blanket couldn't. It gave me something to focus on besides the freezing ache in my limbs and the fear that I might not wake up if I fell asleep. You learn things in a trench that you can't learn anywhere else. You learn how to sleep sitting up, your back against the frozen mud wall, your rifle cradled in your arms. You learn how to eat cold rations without tasting them, shoveling the food into your mouth just for the calories, not caring what it is or what it tastes like. You learn how to relieve yourself in a way that preserves some small measure of dignity, though there's precious little dignity to be found in a muddy ditch in the middle of winter. Most of all, you learn to depend on the men around you, not just for covering fire in a firefight, that goes without saying, but for warmth, for survival, for sanity. We'd huddle together at night, 2 or 3 men pressed close, sharing body heat. There was nothing romantic or even particularly friendly about it. It was pure necessity. Your body produces heat, and another body produces heat, and together you produce enough to maybe, just maybe, keep from freezing. You'd lie there, back to chest, feeling the other man's breath on your neck, his shivers matching your own. Sometimes you'd talk in whispers, sharing stories from home or memories of better times. More often you'd just lie there in silence, listening to the distant rumble of artillery and the occasional crack of a rifle shot, waiting for dawn. I remember one night, it must have been early December, when the temperature dropped so low that the water in our canteens froze solid. We were somewhere in the Ardennes, dug in along a ridgeline that gave us a decent view of the valley below, but offered no protection from the wind. The wind was the worst part. It came howling down from the north, cutting through every layer of clothing, every gap in your defenses. It found its way inside your collar, up your sleeves, through the worn spots in your trousers. There was no escaping it. That night we were 5 men in a section of trench about 20 feet long. Me, Tommy Breslin, a guy named Jackson from Tennessee, Kowalski from Chicago, and our sergeant, a tough old bastard named Donnelly, who'd served in the last war and knew more about survival than all of us put together. Donnelly told us to pair up, to get as close as we could. He said pride won't keep you warm. Dead men don't feel embarrassed. So we did. Tommy and Jackson took one end of the trench. Kowalski and I took the other. Donnelly settled himself in the middle, wrapped in his blanket like some ancient prophet, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of trouble. I pressed my back against Kowalski's chest, and he wrapped his arms around me from behind. I could feel his heart beating, fast and hard. He was scared. We were all scared, though we didn't talk about it. His breath was warm on the back of my neck, and I was grateful for it. My own breathing was shallow, labored. The cold was pressing down on my chest like a weight, making it hard to draw a full breath. "You think we'll make it?" Kowalski whispered. His voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know what to say. The truth was I didn't think about it much. Thinking about whether you'd survive or not, that was a luxury you couldn't afford. You took things 1 hour at a time, one night at a time. You focused on staying warm, staying awake when you needed to be awake, and staying alive until the sun came up. Yeah, I said, finally, because that's what you were supposed to say. We'll make it. My ma's making a roast for Christmas, Kowalski said, his voice dreamy now, distant. Beef roast with potatoes and carrots. She always makes it perfect with that gravy she does, you know, and pie, apple pie with ice cream. I could almost smell it. My own mother wasn't much of a cook. We'd grown up poor, and fancy meals weren't something we had often. But I remembered the few times she'd managed to put together something special. The warmth of the kitchen, the smell of bread baking, the feeling of being full and content and safe. Sounds good, I said. You can come to my house.
The cold wasn't just uncomfortable. It was dangerous. Men got frostbite, lost toes and fingers. Some got sick, pneumonia, bronchitis, infections that their bodies couldn't fight off because they were too weak, too cold, too exhausted. The medics did what they could, but they were overwhelmed. For every man who got wounded in combat, 3 more were laid low by the colds and the conditions. I remember a kid, couldn't have been more than 18, who developed trench foot. His feet had been wet for so long that the skin started to rot. The smell was terrible, sweet and putrid at the same time. The medics said he'd lose at least 2 toes, maybe more. They evacuated him to a field hospital, and we never saw him again. I don't even remember his name. Isn't that awful? This kid suffered through hell, lost parts of his body to the war, and I can't even remember his name. There were others. A man named Peters who got pneumonia and died in his sleep one night, just stopped breathing. A corporal from another platoon who fell asleep on watch and froze to death. They found him in the morning, sitting upright with his rifle across his lap, his eyes open and glassy. Sergeant Donnelly said it was a mercy that at least he didn't feel anything at the end. I don't know if that was true either. We tried everything to stay warm. We'd stuff newspaper inside our uniforms for insulation, though paper was scarce and usually wet. We'd rub our hands together until they burned, trying to get the blood flowing. We'd do jumping jacks in place, though that was risky. The movement could draw enemy fire if they had spotters watching our lines. We'd share cigarettes, not because we wanted to smoke, but because the brief flare of heat from the lit end felt like a tiny miracle. Some men tried to light fires, but that was forbidden. A fire would give away our position, make us an easy target for artillery or mortar fire. Still, every now and then someone would take the risk, would huddle over a tiny flame made from scraps of wood or cardboard, cupping their hands around it to hide the light. If an officer caught you, you'd be in serious trouble, but sometimes the cold was so bad that the risk seemed worth it. I never lit a fire myself, but I warmed my hands over a few. I'm not proud of that, but I'm not ashamed either. We did what we had to do to survive. The days were bad, but the nights were worse. During the day, you could at least move around a little, patrol the line, stamp your feet to keep the blood flowing. There was work to do, repairing the trench walls, filling sandbags, cleaning weapons. The work was miserable, but it kept you busy, kept your mind off the cold. At night, everything stopped. You couldn't move much because movement made noise, and noise could get you killed. You couldn't see much because even the smallest light could draw fire. You just sat there in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the war around you, the distant boom of artillery, the rattle of machine gun fire, the occasional scream of a wounded man calling for a medic. And you were cold. God, you were so cold. I remember lying there one night, listening to Tommy Breslin cry. He was trying to be quiet about it, but I could hear him. Little hiccuping sobs that he couldn't quite suppress. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? We were all at the breaking point. We were all holding on by a thread. After a while, the crying stopped.
Tommy sniffed a few times, wiped his nose on his sleeve. Then he spoke, his voice thick and raw. "I want to go home," he said. "We all do, kid," Donnelly said, from somewhere in the darkness. His voice was surprisingly gentle. "We all do." "I don't think I can do this anymore. I don't think I can take another night." "You can," Donnelly said. "You'll take it because you don't have a choice. You'll take it because the man next to you is taking it, and you won't let him down. You'll take it because going home is the only option that matters, and the only way to get there is through." Tommy didn't say anything else. None of us did. But Donnelly's words hung in the air, and I think they helped. Not because they made the cold go away or the fear go away, but because they reminded us why we were there. We were there for each other. We were there because someone had to be. It's hard to explain what freedom meant to us back then. For most of my life before the war, freedom was just something I had, like air or water. I didn't think about it. I took it for granted. But in those trenches, freezing and hungry and scared, I started to understand what we were really fighting for. We were fighting so that people could live without fear, so that children could grow up without worrying about soldiers kicking down their doors in the middle of the night, so that families could sit down to dinner together without wondering if tomorrow their country would still exist, so that people could speak their minds, worship as they chose, love who they wanted to love. I saw what the alternative looked like. We all did. When we liberated towns and villages, we saw the fear in people's eyes, the way they flinched when we approached, the way they'd been taught to keep their heads down and their mouths shut. We saw the ruins of synagogues, the empty homes of families who'd been taken away. We saw the cost of tyranny, the price of letting evil go unchecked. And I understood, finally, what my country had sent me here to do. It wasn't about conquest or glory. It wasn't about proving we were tougher or braver than the other side. It was about preserving something precious and fragile and worth dying for. It was about freedom, real freedom, the kind that lets you sleep in your own bed at night without fear, the kind that lets you speak your mind without looking over your shoulder, the kind that lets you raise your children in peace. That understanding didn't make the cold go away. It didn't make the fear go away, but it gave me something to hold on to, something bigger than myself, and that mattered. Christmas came. We were still in the trenches, still freezing, still waiting for orders to move. The army tried to make it special. They brought up hot food, turkey and mashed potatoes and gravy, a real meal instead of the cold rations we'd been eating for weeks. They even had a chaplain come up to say a few words and lead us in singing carols. It was the strangest Christmas I've ever experienced. There we were, in a muddy ditch, surrounded by death and destruction, singing Silent Night while the snow fell softly around us. Some of the men cried. I didn't blame them. It was beautiful and heartbreaking and surreal all at once. I thought about my family back home, wondered what they were doing. Were they gathered around the tree, opening presents, eating my mother's attempt at a holiday dinner? Did they think about me? Did they pray for me? I thought about Kowalski, who'd promised to introduce me to his mother. I thought about all the men who weren't there anymore, who'd never have another Christmas. I thought about how lucky I was to still be alive, still be whole, still have a chance to go home someday. And I thought about what we were fighting for, about the families in Europe who'd been torn apart by this war, who'd spend Christmas in concentration camps or as refugees or buried in mass graves, about the children who'd never known peace, never known safety, about the world we were trying to build, a world where this kind of suffering wouldn't happen again. That night, after the carols were over and the chaplain had gone, we settled back into our positions. The snow kept falling, covering everything in a blanket of white. It was still cold. It was always cold. But somehow it felt a little more bearable. We'd made it to Christmas. We'd survived. Winter dragged on. January was somehow worse than December. February was worse than January. The cold became our constant companion, our enemy, our reality. We stopped talking about being warm. We stopped imagining what it would feel like to be comfortable. We just endured. But we also became stronger. Not physically. We were all losing weight, all wearing down, but mentally. We learned that we could take more than we thought we could. We learned that the human body is incredibly resilient, that the human spirit is even more so. We learned to find small moments of grace in the midst of hell. A hot cup of coffee, a letter from home, a joke that made everyone laugh despite everything. We learned what it meant to be brothers. Not blood brothers, but the kind of brothers that war creates. The kind who'd give you their last cigarette, who'd take your watch so you could sleep an extra hour, who would lie down next to you in the freezing darkness so you both had a better chance of making it through the night. I learned that freedom isn't free. I know that sounds like something from a bumper sticker, a cliché that people throw around without thinking, but it's true. Freedom costs something. It cost us those winter nights in the trenches. It cost us our youth, our innocence, our comfortable belief that the world was a safe and reasonable place. It cost us our friends, our brothers, the men we'd have given anything to save. But it was worth it. God help me. It was worth it.